Hello ladies and gentlemen, my name is Chris Stollings. You know me here on YouTube as MarauderEX, and as always I'm your host for Operation Recap, where I take some of the stories from Rainfall and I share them here on YouTube because I'm the YouTube guy. That's what I do. So this week's recap is going to be huge. It is the E3 2014 recap, and because it's so huge, there's so much to talk about. I'm not going to have time to fit everything in. There's so much that we covered, so many trailers that we put up, so many articles we had written, so many hands-on pieces. It's too much for me to cover in just a tiny little recap video. So I'm going to cover some of the larger things, the bigger chunks. So this week's E3 this 2014 E3 recap, I'm going to talk about the big three, which was Sony, Microsoft, and Nintendo, and the games showcased at those events. So it was kind of a hectic E3, just so much going on. The first day of E3 actually was Monday, which is actually technically a day before E3 actually started, which had 4 big press events. You had Microsoft, EA, Ubisoft, and Sony. Though I'm not going to talk about the EA and Ubisoft. I'm just going to stick with Microsoft and Sony for Monday. So Microsoft went first that day, and they showed a bunch of games. They had Crackdown 3 specifically, Fable Legends, the Halo Master Chief Collection, a little bit on Halo 5, Phantom Dusk, Project Spark, Scalebound, Ori and the Blind Forest, Sunset Overdrive, and Forza Horizon 2. That's a very impressive lineup of games. So much going around. They spent a lot of time talking about the Master Chief Collection, about how you could get Halos 1 through 4, and they will all be on the Xbox One in one package, so you can replay the entire Master Chief saga leading up to Halo 5. That's going to be kind of impressive. They talked about Crackdown 3, which kind of amazed me, considering Crackdown 2 didn't really do all that well, but Crackdown 1 was an amazing game on its own, even though most people just bought it simply because it had a Halo beta at the time. But still, it's a great game. Glad to see that there's a third one coming out. Then later that evening, we had Sony's conference, and Sony last year kinda, walked away with the bag, but that was because you had 2 consoles being announced, and you had a one-upmanship going on, and the fact that Sony spent a good bit of time last year talking about, used games and all of the things that people were a little leery about with Microsoft's original prospects for the console. It made Sony clearly more popular last year, but this year it was all about the games. Sony talked about games. You had Entwined, Bloodborne, The Order 1886, Little Big Planet 3, Abzu, The Last of Us Remastered, Let It Die, Infamous Second Son First Light, and Killzone Shadowfall Intercept. It's a lot of words for specific games. Infamous Second Son First Light is actually DLC for Infamous Second Son, adding a new standalone story mode. So you also have Last of Us Remastered, which Last of Us was one of the best-selling PS3 games, one of the best-selling games of last gen all around, and it's getting remastered for the PS4. Bumped up graphics, bumped up resolution. It's getting the royal treatment. And then you've got Little Big Planet 3, which introduced a bunch of new characters. Instead of just Sackboy, you've got Sackboy's friends that all bring something a little different to the party. So I'm looking forward to some user-generated levels in that, because Little Big Planet 1 and 2 have shown what people can make with a really interesting limited palette and what all can be done with that. So very impressive on that. Tuesday was the first actual day of E3, and kicking it off was Nintendo, basically taking all day, because Nintendo throughout the E3 event would also have their Treehouse Lives, where they would just have people for up to 40 minutes at a time just talking about these games. So they started off, they didn't have a traditional press event with the stage event. They just had a digital event, much like their Nintendo Directs, aimed at everyone. Those at E3 got to see it, as well as us at home, pretty much the same fashion. Nintendo's games, you had Captain Toad, Bayonetta 2, Hyrule Warriors, Kirby and the Rainbow Curse, Legend of Zelda Wii U, Mario Maker, Mario Party 10, Splatoon, Smash Brothers, Xenoblade Chronicles X, and Yoshi's Woolly World. They spent a lot of time talking about these games, in depth later on. They didn't talk about them too much during the event. They kind of kept it very concise, very to the point. Just, these are the games. Stick around for the rest of E3 to check them out, which Microsoft and Sony did as well. You could see a lot of their games at their events, but after their main press event, you didn't hear as much about them. You didn't hear Sony or Microsoft pushing them as much. It was their developers pushing them, which, I mean, a lot of them, you know, first party, third party, that's a thing, but Nintendo spent a lot of time just, you know, making sure you knew these games. They were shoving them in your face. So, but then you also had other events going on. Twitch was basically live streaming anything and everything they could get their hands on. They had a Kingdom Hearts event that was actually really, really good. Had a lot of fun watching their 2.5 HD remix panel. That was a lot of fun. Then you also had a lot of other games that just kind of came out of nowhere. You had Far Cry 4 come out, a new Assassin's Creed game, Assassin's Creed Unity. You had No Man's Sky, which is what looks to be one of the most impressive games that I've seen at E3. A procedurally generated world. That means if you've played anything like Minecraft, Terraria, Starbound, that's procedurally generated. It's just, it's a fun way of saying it's kind of random, but it's random with what would be, you know, connections that made sense. So you don't have a fire world right next to an ice world, that sort of thing. It is procedurally generated, and the fact that it is a procedurally generated universe that they are saying is so vast that they haven't seen the end of it, and all of the universes are connected, so you could, in theory, if I'm playing a game multiplayer, I could run into someone else's universe and see what they're doing, which kind of blows my mind. I'm waiting on that one to see if it lives up to that kind of hype, because if it does, that, my friends, is impressive. But there's one thing on each of the three that impressed the crap out of me, which is kind of rare for E3. So I was really stoked to watch E3 this year. I was even more jealous of my coworkers who went to E3 and got hands-on on all of this, got to sit down and do interviews with various industry leaders. I'm so envious of you guys, you have no idea. So, for those of you who watched it at home, you guys are in the same boat as I am. It was one of those things. But check out our YouTube channel. I put up tons of trailers. Check out Rainfall. We put up every bit of information we could get our grubby little hands on this year. All of the hands-on, all of the interviews, all of the breaking news, everything that we could do, we did. So, go check that out. And I'm going to go and spend just a couple of days to recover from the madness that was E3 2014. And I will see you guys next week for another recap. Till then, later everyone.